Hello, I'm Melissa. I'd like to talk to you today about energy, more specifically, nuclear energy. I'd like to explain why the U.S. needs nuclear power as its leading source of energy. There's one common misconception why we oppose nuclear energy, and that's fear. I'd like to set the record straight and identify the source of fear. In 1953, President Eisenhower addressed the UN General Assembly and pledged to provide nuclear technology to all countries willing to not create nuclear weapons. He wanted poor areas of the world to avoid starvation and poverty. But many feared the effects of sharing nuclear power with the world. They feared the poor would rise up, prosper, and challenge the wealthy. So they felt threatened, and they spread rumors that nuclear energy was dangerous. 3 nuclear accidents that followed strengthened that fear. The first was the meltdown at 3 Mile Island in 1979. No one was hurt, but there was a radiation leak. Next was Chernobyl in 1986, the worst nuclear accident in history, where 31 people died, 300,000 people were displaced, and 20,000 were exposed to radiation that caused thyroid cancer. Then the last is Fukushima, Japan in 2011, a nuclear accident caused by an earthquake that created a tsunami. The accident leaked radiation and that resulted in the death of 7. A poll taken in 2012 showed that 62% of people in the world oppose nuclear energy because of fear. I'd like to show you that nuclear isn't so scary. Did you know it's the second largest source of clean energy we have? Newer plants are much safer than power plants from the 1950s and 60s and are highly regulated. Humans have shown amazing ingenuity developing ways to harness energy and transfer it into power. Unfortunately, providing enough energy to keep this busy world and its 7.7 billion human occupants going has become expensive, harmful to our health, and hazardous to the environment. This chart shows the world energy consumption. We get energy from many different sources and depend on these for survival. We need energy for electricity, food, and fuel. However, our top 3 producers are horrible for the environment and are deadly for humans. The reason this is a hypothetical number is because it's difficult to accurately pinpoint the number of deaths related to energy production. Therefore, it is only an estimate. The leading cause of energy-related deaths is from air pollution. There are also recorded deaths from accidents like gas leaks, explosions, and dams bursting, and deaths linked to water contamination as well as chemical exposure. As you can see, nuclear energy has the lowest number of energy-related fatalities. Nuclear energy is harnessed from a process called fission, in which the atoms of the element uranium are split. In the process, a huge amount of heat is released. Water around the heat creates steam to run an electricity generator. Nuclear power plants produce 20% of U.S. electricity. Nuclear power plants do not produce greenhouse gas emissions, and we have plenty of sources of uranium to last us over 100 years. You've probably noticed the rise in solar power plants and wind turbine farms in the past few years. While these alternative sources of electricity are great, they don't collect nearly as much electricity as nuclear power plants. Also, they take up much more land than nuclear plants, and studies show that wind turbines and solar fields destroy their habitats, kill and displace the animals that live in these zones, and they not only change the landscape aesthetic, but they harm flying and ground-dwelling animals. Furthermore, a study by the Breakthrough Institute concluded that solar and wind zones do not affect the current carbon intensity in the environment, but nuclear does. There are numerous studies to support this. Between 1965 and 1998, when Japan added nuclear power, they experienced a steady drop in greenhouse gas emissions. France and Sweden also experienced a drop in CO2 intensity. But after Fukushima, Japan ceased nuclear energy production and replaced it with fossil fuels. Carbon levels quickly rose higher than before. So, Breakthrough's team concluded that state-led efforts to deploy nuclear power plants are the only proven way for governments to deliberately and rapidly reduce and remove carbon emissions in the environment. And this information comes from Mark Nelson from The Power to Decarbonize. You may be worried about nuclear waste. Well, it's the only energy production waste that's safely contained and guarded. Nuclear fuel can produce energy for around 5 years, and then after that, the amount of low-level radioactive waste is very small. The U.S. Waste Isolation Pilot Plant stores waste in a deep geological disposal salt mine in New Mexico, buried safely underground. In March, legislation agreed to boost nuclear energy innovation and appointed the Department of Energy to unveil the Nuclear Energy Leadership Act. So, be ready for new concept, next-generation nuclear fission reactors. Bill Gates, with a group of investors, have pledged $1 billion to companies dedicated to advocating nuclear energy with the goal to replace fossil fuels. Bill Gates would like to see a future with zero man-made CO2 emissions. So let's recap. The world has been misled to fear nuclear energy. President Eisenhower was right to think the world would prosper from nuclear, and it produces large amounts of energy from a very small uranium source. Two comparable sources, wind and solar, destroy habitats and don't even come close to the energy production as nuclear. Nuclear has zero CO2 carbon emissions with very little waste. Our government, as well as leading scientists, researchers, and environmental advocates, including Bill Gates, are on board to expand the U.S. nuclear energy production. Humans are making great strides toward finding cleaner sources of energy. After comparing the facts, it turns out that nuclear energy isn't so bad after all. I believe the U.S. is prepared to rely on nuclear as its leading source of energy in our future. Thank you for your time.